We're not going to America. We're not spending our money there. It's Canada first, baby.
I'm surprised that he's turning on Canada like this, because we were always such good neighbors.
Have you noticed that Canada is quietly taking part in erasing America's most trusted restaurant chains by stopping supporting us recently? Sounds hard to believe, but the numbers don't lie. In just 2 years, Applebee's has shut down over 400 locations. Denny's closed more than 150 restaurants, mostly in border towns once fueled by Canadian weekenders. And IHOP, dozens of their once busy diners now sit dark across cities like Buffalo, Seattle, and Detroit. What we're witnessing isn't just the loss of food, but the unraveling of a routine, and most likely could be a wave of laid off soon due to these restaurants being forced to shut down. If even our closest neighbor can turn away, what happens if the rest of the world follows their steps? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. And today, we expose 15 fast food chains could go bankrupt by Canada's new boycott. Stay with us, because number 3 will make you wonder if the America we grew up with is already disappearing. Number 1, Applebee's. Imagine waking up one day and realizing the restaurant that served your family for 20 years is gone. And to the most shocking, it's because your most supportive neighbor turned its back. That's what happened to Applebee's. And it didn't just disappear from the news, it now vanished from real lives and real memories. That's kind of sad to think about, because Applebee's wasn't just another random chain. For working class families across America, it was where birthdays were celebrated on a budget, where meals were shared on weekend night, and where neighbors waved from booths across the room. But over the last decade, that warmth has been fading. And now the lights are dimming faster than anyone expected. Canada is playing a much bigger role in that disappearance than most people realize. In towns near the border, weekend foot traffic from Canadian visitors made up as much as 30% of revenue. According to a Technomic report from 2018, families from Ontario or British Columbia would cross into Michigan or New York, fill up their cars with discounted goods, and sit down at Applebee's for familiar comfort food. For decades, the close relationship felt stable, even dependable. But behind the scenes, that loyalty has cracked. Let's begin the collapse with the real numbers. By the end of 2024, Applebee's had dropped to 1,586 locations in the United States, which means a loss of over 400 since 2015. And according to leaked projections in early 2025, dozens more closures are on the way, especially in northern towns that once thrived on Canadian visitors. The CEO of Dine Brands himself warned that the chain's footprint is shrinking, and not just because of costs. It's a deeper problem, one rooted in trust. And that's the one Applebee's wants to hide from you forever. The turning point came in 2022, when a leaked internal email suggested rising inflation would actually benefit Applebee's by making people more desperate for work. The language was cold. It implied that human hardship could become a corporate opportunity. And while the comment sparked outrage in the US, it hit even harder in Canada, because it's always a country where fairness and worker respect are deeply ingrained values. The boycott wasn't loud and messy, but it was effective. Quietly, steadily, Canadians chose to go elsewhere together, but bitterly. The one who has to suffer the most from this crisis is not the one who caused this situation. In fact, they're just normal, innocent people who ask for nothing more than just a stable life. Now, families in American border towns find themselves missing something more than food. Retired people who used to meet friends at Applebee's now stay home. Single parents who relied on its affordability now settle for less. And local servers, many who worked there for a decade or more, are left without jobs or support. Americans or Canadians, both are doing nothing wrong, yet they got locked in this messy reality, created by someone who we had trusted for decades. The closure of one restaurant doesn't just mean one less place to eat, but the loss of a fracture in daily life. While Canadian brands like Swiss Chalet and Boston Pizza grow stronger, Applebee's becomes less a place and more a memory. And perhaps the most painful part is that no one fought to keep it alive, just the slow, quiet turning away of once loyal customers. But honestly, could we blame them when silence replaces loyalty? What chance does any brand have to survive? Keep watching, because what's coming next is the one you never knew had went down that deep. Number 2, Olive Garden. You never heard about Olive Garden's collapse in headlines, but you will notice a few empty booths. Then the parking lot isn't as full on weekends. And before anyone can say goodbye, the restaurant that once served as a warm anchor in so many lives is simply gone. That's the quiet fate Olive Garden is facing now, and the silence is loudest in the absence of Canadians. The neighbors who once helped keep these locations alive and bustling, now they're gone. And with them, a part of America's middle-class tradition is slowly fading into memory. At its peak, Olive Garden operated over 850 locations. It offered Italian comfort without the high price tag, with endless breadsticks and warm bowls of soup that felt like a celebration even on ordinary days. Many working-class families still think about it as a taste of something nice within reach. And for Canadian tourists, Olive Garden was a familiar, anxiety-free place to rest after a long day of cross-border trip. No awkward tipping culture, just generous portions and a sense of comfort. In states like Vermont, Michigan, and New York, weekends used to bring in waves of Canadian visitors. Dine Brand's internal reports from 2015 to 2019 showed that up to 25% of peak weekend customers were from across the border. But in 2022, the steady stream began to dry up. Rising gas prices, a weakened Canadian dollar, and strict travel rules made border visits harder. But economics wasn't the only reason for the exodus. In early 2023, Olive Garden's parent company, Darden Restaurants, found itself in the middle of an image crisis. News surfaced that Gene Lee, former CEO of Darden, had received over $11 million in stock-based bonuses, while the company simultaneously laid off thousands of hourly workers across its brands. And take a guess, who benefits from it? Absolutely not the working people. For Canadian consumers, this was a breaking point. Social media lit up with anger. The hashtag #DropDarden trended on Canadian Twitter. Reddit threads with thousands of upvotes questioned why they should support a chain that rewarded executives while abandoning its workforce. And gradually, Canadians walked away. By mid-2024, Olive Garden had quietly shut down several northern locations. Some towns lost their only casual restaurant that employed part-time seniors and students. The ripple effects were immediate. Retirees who met for lunch once a week now have nowhere to go. Single parents lost evening jobs they relied on. Young workers looking for weekend shifts found the doors locked, and the chain's signature warmth, those endless breadsticks and smiles, started to feel like something from a different era. Meanwhile, Canadian chains like Eastside Mario's and Moxie's have been gaining loyalty. Their interiors feel more modern, their prices are lower, and their service feels personal. One Canadian Redditor wrote, "Why would I cross the border for reheated pasta when I can support a real local place that truly cares for customers?" That comment sums up the quiet heartbreak of this shift. According to Dine Brand's internal projections, if current trends hold, up to 80 more Olive Garden locations could close by the end of 2025, and if global trade patterns continue shifting, other countries may follow Canada's lead, cutting Olive Garden out of the picture entirely. And so, as the plates stop arriving and the booths go quiet, another beloved piece of American dining culture begins to fade. What's your opinion about Olive Garden's downfall? Do you think its food is good enough to make up for the loss of trust in the customers? Number 3, IHOP. A quiet corner booth, a pot of coffee that never emptied, and a plate of pancakes so fluffy, they seemed to slow time for decades. IHOP wasn't just a breakfast stop, but a bridge between generations and between countries. Every day, families packed into those blue-roofed havens. Grandparents smiled across tables at grandchildren, and Canadian tourists filled nearby tables. At that time, no one thought that warmth was cooling soon. Since 2022, IHOP has closed at least 60 restaurants in states like Minnesota, New Hampshire, and North Dakota, states that once depended on weekend traffic from Canadian visitors, because that flow has dried up. No more border crossing trips, no more regulars from Manitoba or Ontario making the drive for a $9.99 combo. Today, that same combo costs nearly $15. Eggs, alone, have risen by more than 50% in just 2 years. Gas prices are up. Border travel feels more like a hassle than a getaway. And back in Canada, newer breakfast chains like Eggs Mart and Cora offer better service, cleaner interiors, and lower prices, all without the foreign exchange rate. But IHOP is not 100% innocent. They have to take responsibility for their change. On TikTok and Reddit, Canadians now share stories of IHOP's shrinking portions, burnt bacon, and coffee that tastes like bland water in a mug. But instead of making up for those losses, they decided to cut off employees as if it's business-wise. Low-income people working double shifts as servers suddenly find themselves out of a job. Retirees who greeted regulars for 10 years are shown the door with no notice. And what about the towns where IHOP was the only breakfast spot in a 20-mile radius? They clearly don't care about their customers much these days. The truth is brutal. If Canada and even Americans' quiet rejection continues, analysts expect up to 100 more IHOP locations to vanish by 2026. And if countries like Mexico or the United Kingdom follow suit, IHOP could buckle under its global footprint. Too big to change, too slow to compete. So the question isn't just whether Canadians will return, it's whether IHOP can rediscover what once made it worth the drive. Number 4, Red Lobster. You used to circle it on the calendar. Birthdays, retirements, the first night out in months. Red Lobster wasn't just a restaurant, it was a moment, a place where middle-class families, stretched thin but proud, could sit down to something special without feeling out of place. With over 700 locations across the globe, it stood tall as the working man's version of fine dining, and in the northern border states, it was even more a beacon for Canadian tourists, crossing over to indulge in fresh seafood at American prices. In regions like upstate New York and Michigan, that weekend traffic once accounted for over 12% of business. But by spring of 2024, the doors began to shut. Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, bleeding nearly $11 million in a single quarter. Within 6 months, 99 restaurants vanished. Some went with a sign on the door. Others just went dark overnight, behind the scenes. The storm had been brewing for years. International travel dropped off. Seafood prices climbed. The US dollar weakened against foreign currencies, shrinking cross-border visits. Then came a marketing debacle that tipped the balance, the infamous Endless Shrimp campaign. A promotion designed to bring back customers ended up drowning the brand in debt. Canadian news outlets ridiculed it as a bottomless pit of losses. And the cost: thousands of employees, servers, cooks, hosts were left jobless. Some were immigrants sending money home. Some were grandmothers on a second shift to pay the heating bill. And the customers' elderly couples who once split a lobster tail over quiet conversation now find only locked doors and faded signs. Today, fast casual competitors like Texas Roadhouse are eating up the market Red Lobster left behind. But for many, the real loss isn't the food. It's the last place where celebration didn't feel like a luxury. Number 5, Denny's. At 2 in the morning, under the faded yellow glow of a highway sign, there used to be a place that never said no. Whether you were a tired trucker needing coffee, a family out late from the hospital, or just someone who couldn't sleep, Denny's was there. It was open when nothing else was. It made room when no one else did. With more than 1,700 locations by 2018, many stationed close to the northern border, Denny's quietly became part of everyday American life. In towns like Niagara Falls or Bellingham, long lines of Canadian visitors crossed over just for a plate of pancakes and an endless cup of warmth. But that light has started to dim. Between 2020 and 2024, over 150 Denny's restaurants shut their doors for good. The hardest hits came in states that once depended on cross-border breakfast crowds. A report from the Motley Fool in 2023 revealed a nationwide 19% decline in breakfast visits, but along the border. The drop was closer to 27%. The price of the Grand Slam breakfast, once a working man's treat at $6.99, now hovers beyond $13. For many, it crossed an invisible line between comfort and burden. Then came the blow to reputation. In 2022, a viral video from a Maine location exposed undercooked meat and dirty kitchen conditions. The fallout was swift. Social media across Canada erupted with criticism. To many, Denny's no longer stood for warmth or consistency. It felt stuck in a past it refused to leave behind. The people most affected: retirees, night workers, single parents relying on late-night hours. Whole communities lost their only 24-hour spot. And now, when the streets fall quiet and hunger strikes at midnight, there's no place left to pull over and feel like you belong. Number 6, Buffalo Wild Wings. Once. It sounded like thunder on a Sunday, the cheers, the clinking glasses, the tension of the final quarter shared by a dozen strangers under one roof. Buffalo Wild Wings wasn't just a restaurant, it was the open-air stadium for people who couldn't afford a ticket. With over 1,200 locations at its peak, it planted roots in northern states like Michigan and New York, becoming a ritual for NFL Sundays, UFC fight nights, March Madness. In places like Buffalo, Spokane, and Detroit, entire families marked their calendars not for the games themselves, but for the gathering. Then, slowly, that roar began to weaken. Between 2021 and 2024, over 100 Buffalo Wild Wings restaurants went dark. The hardest hit areas were towns once fueled by cross-border traffic. Inspire Brands' second quarter report in 2023 recorded an 11% revenue dip along the northern corridor. But the deeper blow came from the people a 35% drop in Canadian diners, many of whom once crossed the border not just for wings but for a piece of the American sports culture. But wings got pricey. From 89 cents to nearly $1.79 each. Beer up over 35%, and while American menus inflated, Canada got smarter building its own network of sports hubs. The Canadian Brewhouse, Boston Pizza, and St. Louis Bar and Grill now deliver the same big screen energy without the long drive or the sticker shock. And then came the scandal. A TikTok from Ohio went viral in 2023, showing staff ignoring Asian customers during a game. The backlash was immediate, especially in Canada's diverse communities. More reports followed unsanitary kitchens, short-staffed chaos, a sense that no one cared anymore. In border towns, where students once worked weekends for tip money, those shifts are now gone. The screens still flicker, the jerseys still hang, but the magic, the communal heartbeat of game day is fading. And with it, a piece of connection that no one thought could disappear. Number 7, Dunkin'. The pink and orange sign still glows before dawn, but inside. The counters are clean, the stools are still. And the aroma that once pulled people in from the cold has faded into something hollow. Dunkin', once the crown jewel of the cross-border morning ritual, is now a brand left behind by those who used to love it. For decades. Dunkin' meant something. In towns near the Canadian border, Plattsburgh, Champlain, Watertown early mornings saw streams of cars with Quebec plates. Canadians drove in just for the warm comfort of that foam cup, the sugar-glazed donut box, and the sense of familiarity. At its height, Dunkin' boasted over 11,000 stores worldwide. It wasn't just coffee, it was a habit, a tradition. A small joy at the start of a long day. One older Canadian once said, "We used to cross just for Dunkin' and Target. Now there's no reason." By 2024, that legacy had dimmed. Dunkin' quietly exited the Canadian market after years of failure to compete with brands like Tim Hortons and Second Cup. Revenue in border states fell more than 20% from pre-pandemic days. Holidays that once meant a surge, Victoria Day. Canada Day became just another quiet Monday. Canadians didn't protest. They simply stopped caring. Taste was part of the problem. A 2023 Canadian grocer survey showed 74% preferred domestic coffee. Only 3% even remembered Dunkin' as an option. Reviews labeled it artificial, rubbery, and not worth the gas. Then came the scandals. Accusations surfaced of staff underpayment, age-based firings, and frozen powdered eggs passed off as fresh. A viral TikTok revealing the truth drew over 3 million views, especially outraging Canadian consumers who value transparency. Today, border town Dunkins feel like forgotten sets from an old play. Lights stay on, but regulars are gone. Retirees have lost their morning table. Teens lost their first job, and single moms, who once counted on those part-time shifts, were left behind. If Canada turned away this quietly, who's next? Number 8. The Cheesecake Factory. A chandelier still glows above velvet booths. The dessert display still glistens behind glass. But the noise, the laughter, the clinking forks, the birthdays sung by staff in gold aprons has gone quiet. The Cheesecake Factory, once the go-to indulgence for middle-class families and cross-border travelers, is now just another name flickering above half-empty dining rooms. For years, it was a destination, not just a dinner. Canadians from Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver would plan full weekends around a trip to the Cheesecake Factory. In border cities like Buffalo and Burlington, nearly 18% of guests were Canadian, often spending more than $60 per visit, almost twice the US average, as noted in a 2019 industry report. With over 250 menu items and portions large enough to share, it became a place where the everyday felt like a treat. But that sparkle didn't last forever. By early 2024, border locations saw a 12% drop in revenue. Vacancy rates climbed past 25%. On TikTok, Canadian users posted haunting tours of empty dining rooms. One user captioned their video, "This used to be a weekend reward. Now it's just echoes and dim lights." A staff member in Buffalo quietly admitted, "We used to turn people away. Now we wait. Sometimes for hours, What happened? Canada built its own answer. Chains like Jack Astor's, Earl's, and Moxie's offer sleek, modern experiences at 15 to 20% lower cost. But the deeper shift came from resentment. Trade tensions and rising anti-US sentiment caused Canadians to choose local, not for price, but out of principle. And then came the damage to trust. In 2022, the Cheesecake Factory faced fines for hiding $150 million in pandemic losses, reports of unpaid overtime, cuts to health benefits, and layoffs of older kitchen staff followed. Canadians who value ethics and service began to quietly walk away. Now, those birthday dinners happen elsewhere. Seniors living near the border have lost a place that once brought warmth, and weekend workers let go, in silence. When even cheesecake loses its charm, what sweetness remains? Number 9. Salt Bae, once. A dramatic flick of the wrist was enough to draw crowds across borders. Salt Bae, born from a viral video and sculpted into a dining empire, became the symbol of glamorized indulgence. At the height of his fame, Nusret restaurants in Miami, Las Vegas, and Beverly Hills drew everyone from Hollywood stars to working-class Canadians chasing a taste of luxury. A meal could cost $275 per person, but for many, it was justified just once for the photos, the performance, the status. Gold-dusted tomahawk steaks filled Instagram feeds like trophies from a fantasy. But between 2022 and 2024, the sparkle began to rot beneath the surface. Bloomberg reported a 22% revenue drop at the Las Vegas location, tied directly to the steep decline in Canadian tourists. Then came the backlash, a TikTok video posted by a Canadian family, showing a 3-person dinner that exceeded $1,200 and a 40-minute wait for water garnered over 3 million views. The tone shifted from admiration to collective embarrassment. But the real break wasn't about money, it was about values. Canadians increasingly turned away from showmanship, craving authenticity instead. When Salt Bae disrupted the 2022 World Cup final just to grab a selfie with Lionel Messi, Canadian media blasted the moment as tasteless. What once looked bold now seemed desperate. Meanwhile, Canadian chains like The Keg, Highs, and Black Plug Blue quietly offered elegant service and quality steak without the spectacle, and at 20 to 30% lower cost. One viral comment captured the shift. Why pay for gold when you're treated like tin? Then came the scandal in 2023. The New York Times uncovered labor violations at Nusret passport confiscation, unpaid overtime, immigrant workers locked in 14-hour shifts. In Canada, the backlash exploded. The hashtag that's in it. Don't Tip Salt Bae went viral in Toronto and Vancouver, labeling the brand luxury built on pain. Now, the aftermath is felt clearly. Layoffs spread through U.S. branches, older diners feel misled, and border town youth who once held glamorous weekend shifts let go, quietly and without thanks. Now the gold flakes are brushed off the plate. What shimmer remains for the American dream? Number 10. TGI Fridays. Walking into a Fridays used to feel like stepping into celebration itself. Neon lights, stacked cocktails, and that unforgettable slogan in here, "It's always Friday." For decades, it wasn't just a restaurant, it was a mood. In the 1990s and early 2000s, TGI Fridays became one of America's most successful cultural exports, bringing its festive, casual dining spirit to Canada at a time when cross-border travel was both easy and desirable. From downtown Toronto to the outer corners of Vancouver, Canadians made it a destination, especially in border cities like Buffalo, Detroit, and Seattle. Weekend traffic from Canada regularly filled entire sections of the restaurant, but by 2024, the party had ended. From over 700 US locations in 2010, only about 270 remain today. That's a collapse of more than 60%. As confirmed by Statista, all Canadian branches, including the once thriving downtown Toronto and Vancouver stores, shut their doors by 2023. Rent soared, wages climbed, but Fridays couldn't keep pace, not in revenue, not in relevance. A Restaurants Canada survey revealed that 74% of Canadians under 45 no longer saw value in Friday's food. Words like overpriced, uninspired, and microwaved flooded social forums. One Reddit post captured it simply, "It's just expensive fast food pretending to be something else." Another user wrote, "Used to hit Fridays in Buffalo every long weekend. Now I'd rather hit the Rec Room." And deeper issues linger. Under the control of Triartisan Capital Advisors since 2014, Fridays was rocked in 2022 by leaked franchise documents revealing alleged financial misreporting. While Canadian competitors like Earl's and Boston Pizza innovated, Fridays stood frozen in time, stuck on fried food and nostalgia. Now, the ripple effect has arrived. Servers and cooks near the border, once fueled by Canadian crowds, face layoffs. Midwest towns like Toledo, Grand Rapids, and Duluth are left with dark storefronts and peeling happy hour posters. If Friday itself no longer feels like a celebration, what's left of the weekend in 2025, we're not just seeing restaurants shut their doors, we're living through the slow, quiet unraveling of something deeper. It's the fading hum of weekend laughter, the empty booths where families once shared birthdays, and the stillness replacing what used to be a celebration of everyday life. This isn't about a few lost jobs or slipping profits. It's about the disappearance of the places we built our memories around. When Canada, long one of America's closest neighbors and most loyal visitors, began quietly stepping back, the shift didn't make headlines, but it made scars. Restaurants like Red Lobster, IHOP, and Denny's that once thrived on cross-border warmth are now dim, deserted, or gone. What used to be bustling havens for retirees, road trippers, and weekend diners now echo with absence. And here's the unsettling part: Canada may only be the beginning. As other nations watch and quietly follow suit, we may find ourselves surrounded by the shadows of what used to feel permanent. A booth isn't just a booth. A pancake breakfast isn't just food. These were the tiny anchors of comfort, of consistency, of culture. Now, they're vanishing and we barely spoke a word. So the question isn't just what's next. It's whether we saw this coming and chose to look away, or whether silence crept in so slowly we forgot how loud our lives used to be.